Welcome to The Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to the essential insights. Today, we're plunging into a story that absolutely gripped a nation, fiercely divided public opinion, and honestly continues to be shrouded in a thick fog of mystery: the Jussie Smollett case. Our mission today isn't really to declare a definitive truth. Instead, this deep dive will navigate the incredibly complex, often contradictory narratives surrounding the Jussie Smollett incident and the recent Netflix documentary, The Truth About Jussie Smollett. We're here to unpack the key evidence and the counter-arguments for each side, helping you understand the core arguments and, well, the enduring questions that remain. In a world overflowing with information and competing claims, it's a real challenge sometimes to make sense of it all. So as we go through this, we invite you to consider a fundamental question. How exactly do two truths exist next to each other in today's society, and what does that mean for how you approach stories like this one? Okay, let's unpack this incident because it all began on a cold winter night. The story just exploded into national headlines on January 29, 2019. That's when Jussie Smollett, an actor from the hit show Empire, reported a horrific attack in downtown Chicago. He claimed he was out late, walking home from a Subway sandwich shop, when he was accosted. According to Smollett, a white man started shouting, "Empire, faggot, N-word, and this is MAGA country," referring, of course, to the Make America Great Again political slogan. Then, two men in balaclavas allegedly poured bleach on him and put a noose around his neck. What immediately stood out, and what became a really striking detail in the initial reports, was that when police arrived at his apartment, Smollett was still wearing that noose. The reaction was immediate and absolutely viral. The story sparked widespread sympathy, reaching the highest levels of political leadership within really hours. We saw figures like President Donald Trump calling the news horrible, and then Vice President Kamala Harris publicly declaring it an attempted modern-day lynching. It really seized the national conversation overnight.
It's truly striking how rapidly this story achieved national saturation, immediately drawing such strong reactions from high-profile figures. This case vividly illustrates what we might call the first narrative advantage in public discourse. The sheer emotional weight of Smollett's initial report and the way it tapped into these deeply sensitive societal anxieties around hate crime allowed it to solidify in the public consciousness, often overriding, later evidentiary complexities. It's a powerful lesson in how an emotionally resonant story can establish an unshakable initial truth, almost regardless of what facts emerge later.
That's a really insightful point about the first narrative advantage. It makes me wonder, given the highly polarized environment back in 2019, were there specific elements of Smollett's initial story that, in your view, made it almost irresistible for both the public and political figures to immediately embrace, even before the full investigation unfolded?
Absolutely. Beyond just the emotional resonance, it also had very clear antagonists and a victim, fitting neatly into pre-existing societal narratives. The alleged perpetrator's specific shouts, tying it to a prominent political movement, and the powerful symbolism of the news, all these elements converged. They made it a story that felt urgent and deeply significant, leaving very little room for initial skepticism in many quarters.
Right. So we've set the scene, but here's where it gets really interesting, because the Netflix documentary's title, The Truth About Jussie Smollett. It ends on a question mark, and for a very good reason. There's a powerful counter-narrative that quickly emerged, suggesting the entire attack was, in fact, staged. Legally, the case has had quite a journey. Smollett was convicted in 2021 for reporting a fake hate crime. He was sentenced to 5 months in prison, but only served 6 days before being let out on appeal.
Just 6 days, yeah.
Then, in 2023, the Illinois Supreme Court overturned that conviction based on unlawful double prosecution.
Right, which means, essentially, they couldn't try him twice for the same underlying act. It's a constitutional protection.
Exactly. So, while legally the case is closed, the questions surrounding it are anything but. The case against Smollett largely began with suspicions from the Chicago Police Department. In the documentary, former Chicago Superintendent Eddie Johnson points to what he called a significant red flag: how carefully Smollett was handling the noose in his apartment, as seen on police body camera footage. Johnson, drawing on his personal experiences growing up in the Deep South in Alabama, expressed his doubt, saying he didn't know many Black people who, if a noose had been around their neck, would leave it on there. He believed they would instead treat it with disdain and disgust, removing it immediately.
That's a powerful observation, drawing on lived experience.
It is. Johnson also noted Smollett's hesitation to hand over his phone to the police, which investigators found suspicious for someone claiming to be a victim of a serious crime. Another detail that struck Johnson was the cold est weather that night in Chicago, and Smollett still going out for a sandwich.
Kind of unusual, maybe?
Well, CCTV footage later emerged, showing Smollett walking back into his apartment building with a subway bag in his hand after the alleged incident. Police saw that as inconsistent with someone who had just endured a traumatic attack.
What's key to understanding the police's perspective here is how these seemingly minor, almost domestic details, the handling of the noose, the
Right.
phone hesitation, the sandwich run they accumulated, they built up into a pattern of inconsistencies for the investigators.
Right.
For them, it probably wasn't one single smoking gun, but rather the sum of these incongruities that shifted their focus from searching for perpetrators to suspecting a staged event.
Yeah.
It really highlights the importance of what we might call behavioral forensics in an investigation, where actions after the event are scrutinized for how well they match the reported trauma.
And those behavioral forensics certainly seem to point the police in a particular direction, but the core of the hoax theory really centers on two individuals, the Usindaro brothers, Abimbola, or Bola, and Olabinjo, Ola. These two brothers knew Smollett, and they claim that he actually orchestrated and paid them to attack him.
A huge claim.
Absolutely. Bola alleges that Smollett first texted him on the low. Then, when Bola came to the Empire set, Smollett specifically asked them to beat him up and record it for social media. Bola even offered a motive, saying he believed Smollett wanted to be the poster boy of activism for Black people, for gay people, or for marginalized people.
Wow. That's quite a motive to suggest.
It is. And police evidence seemed to strongly back up their involvement with rideshare and taxi data, placing the Asunderos as the only two people in the immediate vicinity of the alleged crime at the time it happened.
That's pretty specific data.
Very specific. What's more, the brothers flew to Nigeria the very day after the incident, only to be apprehended upon their return to the U.S. Their claimed perspective on the whole thing was that they sort of assumed this kind of staged event happened all the time in Hollywood, like a PR stunt gone wrong.
Almost naive in a way, if that's true.
It's also worth noting the police pointed to a distinct lack of hard evidence at the scene itself specifically, no direct video footage of the attack, and no DNA evidence linking unknown assailants.
This segment of the narrative truly crystallizes the prosecution's case, doesn't it? The Osundaro's direct testimony, coupled with the digital evidence like rideshare data, placing them there, and then their immediate flight to Nigeria. It created a powerful circumstantial narrative, a narrative of premeditation and an alleged cover-up. It's a classic example of how, in the absence of direct video or DNA evidence of the attack itself, a combination of witness testimony and corroborating indirect evidence can become the bedrock of a legal case. Their assumption about Hollywood also offers a curious lens into how individuals might rationalize their involvement in something like this.
It's incredible how that circumstantial evidence, plus their testimony, became so central, especially when, as you mentioned, there was no direct video of the attack itself. It forces you to weigh the strength of a narrative built on inference against the lack of, direct physical proof. Now, let's pivot sharply to the other side. Because despite the conviction and much of the public perception that followed, Jussie Smollett maintains his innocence to this day. The documentary features his perspective and presents several arguments in his favor, directly challenging that hoax theory. Smollett's narrative begins with what he says was a pre-attack threat. He claims he received a disturbing note at work made with cutout letters and featuring a stick figure with a noose around its neck before the street incident.
So establishing a prior threat context.
Exactly. And when it comes to the noose itself, which became such a prominent detail, Smollett provided an explanation for why he was still wearing it when officers arrived. He stated, and this is a direct quote from the film, "I was not sitting there for 35 minutes with it around my neck. I put it back on because I wanted to show them what was happening."
Okay, offering his rationale for that specific action.
Right. And regarding those crucial text messages to the Osunder brothers that the prosecution highlighted, Smollett offers an alternative interpretation. He claims they were code for asking for an illegal herbal steroid from Nigeria, one he believed would help him lose belly fat.
Code for steroids, not staging an attack. That's a very different interpretation.
Very different. And the $3,500 check he wrote to Bola, Smollett says it was simply payment for personal training sessions, not for staging an attack.
These explanations from Smollett are fascinating because they directly aim to dismantle each red flag raised by the police and the Osunderos. By providing alternative, seemingly plausible reasons for the noose, the text, the payment, Smollett attempts to reframe the narrative
Yeah.
from one of alleged deception to one of misunderstood actions, basically. It's a strategic effort to introduce an element of reasonable doubt,
Hmm.
arguing that what appeared incriminating was, in his telling, entirely innocent or just misconstrued.
Yeah.
This approach highlights how the same piece of evidence can be interpreted in wildly different ways, depending on the overarching narrative you believe.
And those different interpretations certainly extend to other elements as well. The documentary introduces eyewitnesses who appear to support Smollett's account. A security guard at a Sheraton hotel near the incident claims he saw a white man running around the time of the attack.
A white man specifically.
Yes. And even more compelling for Smollett, a neighbor in his apartment building reported seeing a man with rope hanging out of his coat while she was walking her dog right in front of the building. Smollett himself reflected on this, saying, "I thought to myself, this is it. This is going to exonerate me."
That sounds like potentially corroborating evidence for his story.
It does. The documentary also features the analysis of two freelance journalists who reviewed police videos. They argue that the running figure seen in the footage looks white, not black, directly contrasting with the heritage of the Asundar brothers, who are black.
Challenging the identification based on the video itself.
Exactly. And Smollett's attorney, Tina Glandian, presents a really key logical argument, posing the question: why would Jussie hire two Nigerian guys to do an attack that he was going to say was perpetrated by white guys if it was going to be caught on tape?
It's a point that certainly gives you pause, right?
It absolutely does. These additional details, particularly the eyewitness account suggesting a white assailant and the attorney's logical challenge, they're crucial for Smollett's defense because they introduce genuine ambiguity. If there were eyewitnesses suggesting a white assailant, and if the video footage is indeed ambiguous regarding race, it directly undermines the Osundar's claims and the police's initial shift in focus. Glandian's argument, in particular, is a powerful exercise in common-sense logic designed to make the prosecution's theory seem fundamentally flawed at its premise.
Yeah, it's clever.
It highlights how the defense seeks to poke holes in the prosecution's coherent narrative by introducing elements that disrupt its internal consistency, forcing a reevaluation of the entire sequence of events. It's an interesting strategy, isn't it, to take the same set of facts and reframe them, or introduce new contradictory facts to build a completely different picture. It really speaks to the challenge of evaluating evidence when it's so layered and contradictory. So as you can hear, we have these two compelling yet incredibly different narratives, each with its own set of evidence, explanations, and logical arguments. How does the Netflix documentary itself attempt to navigate this complex, almost dizzying landscape? The director, Gagan Rehill, openly stated his intent was not really to get further concrete answers. Instead, he wanted viewers to think, oh, okay, well, we live in a society now where these two truths can exist next to each other.
Kind of acknowledging the irresolvable nature, perhaps.
It seems that way. He seems to suggest that for some, the evidence for the hoax is overwhelming, while for others, Smollett's counterarguments and the lingering doubts are equally persuasive. Smollett's participation in the documentary is framed as his way of setting the record straight. He describes the relentless news cycle as a game of whack-a-mole, where he constantly had to swat down rumors and theories.
Understandable, given the media frenzy.
Yeah. He closes the film with a powerful statement, saying, "At the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether someone likes me or doesn't like me. What is important is, regardless of what you think about me, flaws and all, flaws and greatness, whatever you think, joy and sorrow, I didn't do that fake a hate crime, and that's all that matters." It's clear that for him, despite everything, his personal truth remains steadfast.
This deep dive and the documentary itself really serves as a powerful illustration of the inherent difficulty in reaching universal consensus when a story becomes this complex and, frankly, politicized.
Absolutely.
The director's stated intent to simply present two truths reflects a modern reality where definitive, universally accepted conclusions are increasingly rare, It underscores how the framing of information, even in a seemingly objective documentary, can reinforce rather than resolve ambiguity, leaving the audience to grapple with their own interpretations. Ultimately, this case becomes a mirror, reflecting our own biases and our own criteria for what constitutes truth in a deeply fragmented information landscape.
Absolutely well put. So, whether you find yourself swayed by the hoax theory, convinced by the prosecution's chain of circumstantial evidence, or if you believe Smollett's account and the arguments that cast doubt on the official narrative, this deep dive reveals the intricate layers of a story that truly gripped a nation. It leaves many fundamental questions unanswered and different perspectives firmly entrenched.
Indeed. This case, And the extensive public discussion around it underscores how deeply entrenched narratives can become and how challenging it is to achieve universal consensus, even when extensive information is presented. It pushes us to examine our own biases and the way we process information, particularly when conflicting viewpoints are presented so persuasively.
So, the final thought for you, our listener. In an era where information spreads instantly and conflicting narratives often battle for dominance, how do you discern truth? Especially when key questions remain unanswered and, as the documentary suggests, two truths can exist next to each other. What criteria do you use to evaluate evidence and decide what's important, as Smollett puts it, in a complex story like this? Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.